Another shadow video for you folks, and this one isn't to talk about how great the regular retail version of the shadow is, but instead to talk about a sample boot. This isn't just any regular old sample. This is actually a development sample. What does that mean? Well, if you look on the back of the heel, there's a 4 of 10, probably meaning there were 4 of these. This is the 4th one out of 10 they made in production. And as you see in the label here, it says sample, not for sale. And again, this was a boot that wasn't designed to be sold, but in fact was part of the early development cycle until they got the actual finished product. And it's interesting to see how some of the differences with this sample pair were changed in the final finished product. First, see this darker gray black part of the boot? That is actually a different type of knit or synthetic from the IntelliKnit. The IntelliKnit is a very soft, responsive knit that likes to wrap around your foot, and then they put a nice thin layer of microfilm over the upper, basically a very thin layer of polyurethane or plastic to just give it a structure while the knit compresses around your foot, but doesn't get too sloppy, and again, gives you a nice thin touch on the ball. Well, on the sample pair or the development pair, you see that the knit here, or the synthetic that they use, is much thicker than on the standard retail pair. See how it's much thicker and covers a lot more of the boot? On the retail pair, and it's a little hard to see, but it's just that little strip right there, and then a little bit on the edges of the boot. Again, this is just here for the structure of the boot, also to help bind it to the sole plate a little bit. And again, there it is over there and over there. Again, much thinner in comparison to that of the sample pair. The reason why it's there is, again, to reinforce the boot. Well, I've actually had this complaint on the SG version of the Shadow Pro, which is why I changed the studs out and got them Pro Custom, so I didn't have to go with the SG pair. But with this thicker and synthetic, which is on the SG pair of Shadow Pro, the upper that wants to really, wrap around your foot just can't quite, because the synthetic just won't let it. Again, it's there for structure, but it just won't let it compress as nicely as the final finished retail pair does. Well, because of that, it actually gives a kind of a hard pressure around the base of the foot, and it's just not a very comfortable experience. Well, you can tell in the sample pair that they were kind of playing around with either making this thicker, and then again they made it thinner. Where you put this part of synthetic to provide structure, here they actually have it off to the side. In the finished product, they went down the middle. And the actual funny thing is the side pieces are pretty much in the same location. Now, in terms of other features in the boot, the IntelliKnit is bang on. They did not change any part of the IntelliKnit at all. The sock tongue is exactly the same, and again, goes all the way down throughout the whole upper of the boot. So that is interesting to see that they pretty much nailed the IntelliKnit, at least in this version. Again, we'll see where this was in the development cycle. This might have been the 4th one of 10 versions, or my guess is this is 4 of 10, or maybe that's even a date. I'm not even sure. So the IntelliKnit was exactly the same. The micro film thin layer is the same, minus though the ghost film, which is just this extra bits that they add on to help, basically as a kind of all to add a little extra grip on the ball. And it does actually a pretty good job, and for the most part is pretty durable, but a little bit of fraying. So they've added that on the retail version, and they hadn't quite either developed it yet, or they hadn't gotten around to adding it to the sample just yet. So that is the only differences with the uppers. The sole plate is exactly the same, and you know, for the most part with the sole plate, it comes from the Magnetico clone line, so, or the Magnetico SL line, and it's exactly the same. So same sole plate that we've always had. They haven't changed anything with that. No need to change perfection, right? Now, the last differences between the boots is the sole board. Here, on the retail version, you have this kind of almost spongy, almost foamy feel. It's very thin, but it just adds a little bit of comfort to the boot. The insole already is quite nice, so it's not that noticeable, that little material there, because again, they have a nice insole already, which is exactly the same on the retail pair. They didn't change that. But it's interesting on this retail pair is you have that little bit of sole on the on the sole board, but on the sample, it just is a cloth stitched together. Probably the Intellinet just stitched all the way through, and then the exposed sole board. So they hadn't quite gotten around to either developing that, or they hadn't yet gone around to trying that out on the sample pair, because, this was always going to be a sample pair, not for sale. So maybe they didn't get around to the sole board yet, because there was no point. They just wanted to see the upper material. As you can see with the Intellinet upper, it looks exactly the same as the retail pair on the inside, just again with that different sole board. Why did I buy a boot that also does not fit me? Is a sample pair. It doesn't have the features that I like on the Shadow, and that I will never wear because, again, size and just overall fit is not that of the standard retail pair. Well, it's because I love the Shadow Pro so much that I want to have this in my collection. I have several pairs of the Shadow, so adding one more, which to me was really cool, adding this sample pair that, you get to see a little bit of the insights of the development and how they were playing around with ideas and going around. And again, this is almost a finished product, so it really excites me as a boot collector. And maybe for other boots, I wouldn't be that interested, but because this is one of my favorite boots, I just had to get this pair, which thank you, James from Boot Wizard Boot Reviews, for helping me out in securing a pair. It was from the UK site, so it was definitely a huge thanks to him that I got this pair. And again, I'm very excited to have this as part of my collection. But yeah, sample pairs or developmental sample pairs are just really cool. And if you're a boot collector, kind of a must.